On this date in 1973, my baby sister died, and I was not with her. I was 8 years old. She was 6 years old. We both went to Carmichael Elementary School in Louisville, Kentucky. Um, it was customary for us to walk home together after school. We were latchkey kids. Um, my mom was effectively a single mom and uh, worked during the day. So we'd walk home together, have a snack, watch cartoons till mom got home, and then have the usual thing. For reasons I don't recall, on this particular day, I rushed home on my own to watch a TV program, Presto the Magic Clown. He was a middle aged, overweight, clown painted guy who did the simplest of magic tricks, which was not the draw for me. The best part were the cartoons. Some of my favorite cartoons played. And I was watching cartoons when a cousin of mine came to the apartment, knocked on the door. I let her in, and she's shouting at me that, your sister got hit by a car. Your sister got hit by a car. And because back then my cousins tended to joke in ways that could be considered harsh and kind of cruel, I took it as humor. Couldn't imagine that being true. So I went back to watching my cartoons and didn't think any more about it because I was 8 years old. But my mom came home at some point. She came through the door and she yelled my name. I was upstairs. I came halfway down the steps and she was standing at the bottom of the stairwell. And her eyes were filled with tears, just brimming and spilling over. And she walked halfway up the steps and said, "Ricky, Vonnie's dead." And she collapsed against me, holding me in tears, just weeping, just bawling. And I began to cry with her, as much out of shock as anything else. And the first shock wasn't that she confirmed my sister was dead, because obviously the concept of death, I don't know how sharp that is for 8 year olds. It wasn't for me. But it was her breaking down. My mother was a strong woman. She was very firm. She was very courageous. She broke completely down. I'd never seen that before, and I had no idea what to do with that, psychologically or emotionally. But we held each other, and we were there for a while. Told versions of this story in different places, but just small pieces. I didn't really get down to it. And I thought maybe 52 years later, it's important to tell the whole story. One of my favorite things to remember about my little sister was something she said, maybe when she was 4 and I was 6, but it was really funny, and we laughed about it off and on for days afterwards. We were watching television, and she was scratching, in her chest breast area, and she kept scratching. And I looked over and I said, "Bonnie, what's wrong with you?" She said, "I've got an inch on my titio." Now, we both knew she meant itch, uh, but it's so funny the way it came out. We laughed and laughed and laughed, and that's something I've never forgotten about, and I don't want to forget about her. I've lived with her absence, with that hole in my heart, for 52 years. 1 year longer than my mother's had to live with that hole because she passed last year. Um, 15 years longer than my father had to live with that hole because he passed in 2010. There's so many more stories related to her, and I'm sure that she's in heaven, and I'm sure that I will see her again at some point. And I firmly believe that in important ways that my life has been guided, sometimes limited, sometimes expanded and encouraged, as a direct result of her having been in my life and losing her early in my life. The funeral is sketchy in my memory. The things that stood out to me were the fact that my mom wasn't crying, and I wasn't crying. I think mostly because I think I was expected to keep it together. That was kind of a thing in our family. And the other thing that stood out to me was the fact that my father was there. In a different story, I can tell you about how he spent the majority of his adult life in prison. But he was there. He was incarcerated at the time she died. But they have a policy, I guess, of letting prisoners attend the funerals of immediate family members. So he was there with two law enforcement officials, U.S. Marshals or whatever they were. But he wasn't really there because I could see on his face that he had a lot of pain. I could see that he felt responsible. And I could also see that he felt like he was looking at it through aquarium glass. Because while he was there with us, he was under guard by law enforcement. So he wasn't really there. I don't think he could be himself. And I think he may have shed a tear silently or two, but I don't recall that specifically. I do recall the feeling of it's done. Everyone was acting like it's over. Time to forget about it and move on. Because back in the day, we didn't have a lot of encouragement for professional support with grief and other things. There was the church, but we weren't really big in the church. So as an 8-year-old boy, I just was expected to suck it up and move on. But the funeral definitely was a closing thing for me, and it was a long time before I could think about it again. One of the ways losing my sister at such a young age impacted the remainder of my life is about avoiding responsibility. As an 8-year-old boy, losing my sister and believing that it was my fault that she died because I wasn't where I was supposed to be doing what I was supposed to be doing, um, made me averse to taking responsibility, made me actively avoid taking on any task or role that meant I was responsible for someone else's well being, or really almost anything. Because in my heart, I felt if I messed up, somebody was going to die. And that was a very crippling way of being. I'm not saying that was, every single moment of every single day, but when important things came up, I had a serious, deep fear and anxiety, tightness that I would feel. And I was too young and unsophisticated to understand where that was coming from. I went through a phase of having headaches when I was young. I went into and withdrew from an advanced program class, in part because of the impacts of that experience. On the flip side, um, I've probably been a better friend to women, younger women, with whom I've worked or had friendships because I sort of had the big brother syndrome. Kind of adopted them and worked hard to ensure they knew they were cared for, um, that they had some success in whatever they're trying to do. Maybe in my heart somewhere I felt like I would make up for my failure all those years ago. I was probably overbearing a lot. There are a couple of ladies I worked with uh, when I was a director, and they were assistant directors, associate directors, excuse me. They could probably tell you stories about how I was with them. Probably a little overprotective, Uh, probably a little like, how big brothers can be kind of jerky with their little sisters. I probably brought some of that into it. Maybe one day they'll come on and tell their side of that story. Point is, that experience had lots of different impacts on me. It definitely deepened my sense of compassion and empathy for suffering, um, and planted the seeds for me to grow and evolve on the side of working for the oppressed. That, among other things. Anywho, there are those two pieces. So, to help honor her memory on this day, my encouragement for you is this: try to keep in mind that the pain you feel, the grief you have from missing loved ones who have passed on, is just excess love. The fact that you still love them and you have no place to put that love because that love is specifically for that person. Just see it that way and use that love to do something. Do something compassionate, something merciful, something helpful, particularly for people who cannot do it for themselves, who have no way of repaying you for doing it. Do it in a way that's not publicly visible. Try not to get accolades and pats on the back for doing it, but do it because you love the person that's no longer with you. And you're giving that love to someone who may not be receiving the love that they need. That's my encouragement for you today. Um, See you next year.